Hi and welcome back to MDriven. This session is about a new thing that we added to the OCL debugger in order to help you to create better cache modules. What's a cache module? Well, you can do a server-side view model that you check this checkbox, cached and auto update. If you do that, we will track whatever data you use during that operation, and if any of that data changes, we will redo the operation. So this is really great for creating caches. Like if you want to export something to another system, whenever something that you included in the export changes, you will want to do a re-export. Or if you have like a complex compound name stored as a string in a database, and that depends on 15 different things, you will want to redo that name calculation whenever one of those 15 things change. That's really tough and hard to get right all the time. And that's why they say that cache invalidation is one of the toughest problems in computer science. Using the cache module, this has turned into a very simple task. However, there's one caveat, that you may end up enclosing too much. There are things that you technically depend upon that you actually don't depend upon in reality. Or rather, that in reality, it's not likely that they will change. So in order to fix this, you will want to see exactly what your cache module depends upon. And that's what this new tool helps you with. Let's get right into it. So in this example, it's something that's called a campaign row, and we have checked the cache and auto update. So what we expect for that to do is to do all of these things that are in the view model, but it makes use of this transform operator that in turn brings in another view model to transfer and create a new object. So if we check the transform view model, we can see that there's quite a lot of things. From the campaign row, it follows to the customer article, the sales article, and the prices, list price and net price, etc. So there's a lot of stuff. And also there are derivations in here that probably bring in more data. So we're going to check this expand derivation to resolve these red lines to see even more what's in here. And even more things pop out, like imported MDS COGS administrator. What's that? So when you see this, it's not too far-fetched to think that some of these things aren't really that important when it comes to detecting if there's a change on a campaign row. So that's probably what we want to do here. Detect changes to stuff that are important to a campaign row. And if we think about it, of course, the net price will probably be important. But there are multiple net prices because there's a time interval. And that time interval is deduced by the campaign stop date, which is here. So probably we don't need all the net prices, but most likely we will grab all the net prices because we need to loop through them to know which one we're gonna have. And technically, we have then used all the net prices for this customer article. And the same thing will be true for list price, etc. The cache module is rooted in campaign row. So we're gonna head over to the debugger and start it up against something that we know has a lot of data so that we can see some real campaign rows and see how this cache module behaves. So starting the debugger and finding campaign row. Then I can use the seeker to search among the data that I have to get some root objects that I can apply to my cache module. Both the result as root for view model 3 and also the result as root for view model UI has been given this new button, cache invalidation manifest size. And that's the new thing that I'm gonna show you today. But in order to run the cache module, I will need a root object. So I'm gonna drag this root object here to here, and then find the view model that was named transform campaign row for export. And then I press cache invalidation manifest size. So doing that, the debugger simulates the cache invalidation run and lists all the attributes and their corresponding objects and counts them. So it will give you a complete list of what we call the manifest. The manifest means that any one of these details, if that change, the cache module will become invalidated. An invalidated cache module will be updated. So it's important to understand that if I have a very large manifest, it's easy to get the module invalidated. If I have a very small manifest, it's harder to find a way to get the module invalidated. Of course, doing the correct thing and changing a depending attribute will always get the cache module invalidated, followed by a cache module update. I can copy all this and go into a notepad to look at it more clearly. I can zoom it in for us to see. So here's an interesting finding that we have the currency rate, 16 objects of class currency rate and the attribute currency. So most likely we are looping over a lot of currency rates to find the currency rate that is valid at the time of the campaign. And of course, it's technically correct that we depend on all of these, because in theory, a currency rate can all of a sudden switch dates on which it is active, but not likely, not as part of the other business rules that we have. It's almost like an immutable thing. Once you have set that the currency rate starts from January 1st, it pretty much is from January 1st until there's a new currency rate at a later point. Also, the imported MDS COGS is something similar, that we import a lot of cost of goods and we iterate over 24 of those. And at the very bottom, VAT, so 28 of those. So there's in some 131 rows in this cache module. And in the boiler text at the bottom here, we say that the manifest probably shouldn't contain more than 50 rows. If it's as many as 131, we probably have an overage. It's nothing wrong with it, but in this particular case, the campaign rows were 120,000. Then you need to multiply 120,000 times 131. And then that builds up. That's a lot of rows to add to our database. And we probably want to avoid that if not at all necessary. It's also important to understand that this was one example object. We need to check more objects, root objects, to see if 131 is an extreme, if it's extremely low, extremely high, or if it's normal. So we probably should use this tool on multiple root objects to see what the average is. So finding another object, reapplying the tool, I can see that there are even more objects, 394. So that's 400. So almost 400 times 120,000. That's a lot. That's like 35 to 40 million rows. And that might be too expensive to keep track of this. So we need to cut these values down. I cut the values down by deciding which classes that I don't want to keep at all. So this currency period, I've decided that I'm going to strip altogether. And then there's a few others, currency rate, etc., that I'm going to remove from the cache module. The imported MDS cogs, that will save me a lot. So I can fix this by updating the attribute cache ignore classes on the cache view model. What this will do is it has a list of classes that we want to avoid altogether. So if the class name is found in this list of strings, then we will just skip those for the manifest. And that's a way to save, to cut down on the manifest size. I then head back to the debugger and reread the model so that I get the new definition, and then I reapply the tool. So I can see that it has shrunk, but I forgot a few things. I'm gonna try the other object as well. And I can work like this back and forth until I get an acceptable low number in the manifest size. So in this particular case, I've cut out classes altogether, and that might be fine. It might be good, and I think it's okay in this case. However, it could be like that even if we traverse a lot of objects in order to find the right one, we still want to subscribe or be dependent upon the one we pick. So in order to do that, I can work with another filtering mechanism in the cache view model. And this mechanism filters away objects. Objects that I explicitly say I don't want can be thrown away from the manifest. So in this case, it looks like the marketing company has a default currency with currency rate, and those are checked against a date, and I grab the first one that falls within this date interval. So probably I want to subscribe to the one that falls within the interval, but all the other ones that I need to iterate over in order to find that one, I don't want to subscribe to. It's unlikely that any one of those that I rejected comes back being the correct date on currencies normally doesn't change. So I can copy the expression from the get local currency method here and add a new view model column in cache invalidation module called cache ignore objects. The one we looked at earlier was called cache ignore classes. So that's a list of class names, but cache ignore objects, it assumes that there's a list of objects that we should ignore. And you can have multiple cache ignore objects columns. You just need to make sure that they start with cache ignore objects, and then you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to rewrite this to be in the context of a campaign row, like this: self-campaign, customer, marketing company, then default currency. And then I will check against the campaign start date and stop date. And all of those objects are the ones, these are this one that I want. But I'm going to invert this by putting reject instead of select. So by doing reject, we have all the ones, all the currency rates, and the one that is the correct one, we reject from this list. That means that will be left in the manifest and all the others won't be in the manifest. You can also see that I put a _1 here, so I can have many of these if I want to throw away specific objects from the total of objects that are included in the cache module. Having done this, I head back to the debugger, and once again I reapply the tool to see what has happened. Now I can see that the currency rate is just 1 instead of the many that we have from initially. So that's good. So this would be an acceptable change of the cache module, gone from almost 400 rows to 39. So that's almost a factor 10 of reduction of the cache module manifest. And that was all that I had for today. Thank you for listening.